going to be a brief introduction, and then I'm just going to start out, asking you about you personally, like when you were born and where you lived, and then how you got to Indialantic, and then family. So basically, okay. Ready?
Yep.
Okay. All right. Hi. This is February 9th, 2008. It is 10 till 11 in the morning, and we are at Denise Bozeman's house, 221 Orlando Boulevard in Indialantic. I am Denise, and I'm here with Lois Mussler-Robinson. The purpose of this interview is to videotape oral recollections of significant Indialantic and surrounding communities' history. Lois, thank you so much for agreeing for this interview.
You're welcome.
Lois, tell us a little bit about where you were born and when, and your family and your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Amityville, New York, Long Island, and my husband calls me the original Amityville horror. But my father was born and raised in Hicksville, Long Island in New York, and my mother from Hempstead. And my father was in the military when World War II broke out. And he traveled around during the war, and we traveled with him. And my father was stationed at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C.
What was your father's name?
Lois Mussler. And he decided that he liked the area when he got out of service. They bought some property there. They built a business, a motel and a restaurant, and lived there for a number of years. My grandmother, in the meantime, had remarried after many years of being a widow. And then she moved down to Melbourne with her husband, and they lived over on Strawbridge. And they, when my grandmother passed away, my folks came down and went to the funeral, and they fell in love with Melbourne. My father and my mother both liked to fish, so the Indian River was great.
Now, what year was this?
This was in 1948, and they came down a few years afterwards and did vacationings when they could get away. And my father finally said, "That's it. I'm going to retire again." So he had retired from the military, and then he retired again from the business. We sold the business, and he moved down here, bought a house in Indialantic, and lived there until he died, which was in 1992.
Now, how old were you when you and your family moved?
I was 15.
Okay.
I resented it. I did not want to leave. I loved where I lived in Virginia. I had been there since I was about 10 or 11 years old. And I didn't want to move down, and it was the first time in many years that I had been stationary because of Daddy being in the military and traveling so much. So I had no choice, though. My folks were coming down. My dad was telling me all these great things about the area, and I didn't believe him. And the first day that I drove across the bridge at Indian River in Melbourne, I looked out and I saw the river was like glass. It was just gorgeous. And then we went to my uncle who was driving the car. He was driving me down at the time, and my folks were already here. And he said, "Let's go to the ocean." So we drove out to the ocean at Indialantic, and I was sold. I never wanted to leave.
Do you remember what Indialantic looked like at that time? Can you tell us
Indialantic,
first impression?
yeah, Indialantic was a little residential community. It was just homes. Fifth Avenue was mostly homes. There was only one or two businesses along the way. One was the Tropic Shop on the corner of A1A and Fifth Avenue. The rest of the places along Fifth Avenue were private homes. And there was a gas station on the corner, and there was on A1A, and there was a little mom and pop grocery store next to them on A1A, and I don't remember the name of it or the who owned it. But it was just a little community, and it was a very small community. The town, of course, as you know, it's such a small town, but it had a sense of community, and everybody knew everybody in town. I may not remember their names now, but I did know most of the people at the time. When you got over by the ocean, the Bahama Beach Club was there, and that was a big draw for people that wanted to belong to the club. It was a private club at the time, but it was so beautiful inside, and I had never seen anything like it before. To to be right on the ocean. I had never lived on the ocean. I had always lived either toward the mountains or inland on a flatland area.
Now, you were a teenager when you moved here. Where did your family move to in Indialantic?
We moved to 235 Michigan Avenue, and it was a small house, a little two-bedroom house with a kitchen, living room, one bath, and it had a carport, but it didn't have a roof over it. And my father, being very handy with tools, built onto the house. He added a huge bedroom and a big family room, and eventually built another kitchen onto the house. My mother used to call our kitchen that we had originally a nice closet. The houses were very small.
Now, did you have brothers and sisters?
I had one brother, 5 years older than me, Ed Mussler. He was in the Navy at the time and was stationed down at Key West when we first moved down here, so he was able to come home whenever he got leave, and he loved Key West and being in the Navy too.
When you came here and you started to go to school, what school did you go to?
I went to Mel High, Ruth Henniger School over on New Haven, and Mrs. Henniger was the principal at the time when I started there. So I knew her, and Frank Brown came in about a year or so later, and she became the assistant principal.
And that was still, you graduated from Mel High when it was still in
Yes,
Henniger.
It was 1954 I graduated, and it was Ruth Henniger, and I actually graduated in what is now is the Ruth Henniger Auditorium, where they put on all kinds of stage productions.
And you're, so this is 1954 right
Mm-hmm.
now. And how did you meet your husband? Did you meet him here?
I met my husband in Melbourne Beach at the casino. I was taking life-saving classes. I thought that was a nice way of meeting boys. I was 17. And he was in the Air Force at the time. And we met. He had been dating a girl that I went to school with. And she was about a year or so older than me, but a year older, I guess. But he was stationed at Patrick Air Force Base. And we dated on and off for a little while. He went overseas to Germany, and when he came back to Melbourne, and we started dating again. And a year later, we were married. Oh.
Tell me a little bit about where you were married.
We were married in the Presbyterian Church by a Lutheran minister. There was no Lutheran church in the area at the time, so they used other churches. But we were married there in the Lutheran church, and our reception was over at the Tradewinds Hotel, which is sadly gone now. But it was a lovely hotel, very old and beautiful, and inside and out, and the grounds were lovely.
And where was Tradewinds located at that time?
The Tradewinds was on Shannon Avenue in Indialantic, and it was an old hotel, one of the original hotels, I believe, in the area.
At this time, what kind of activities were you involved in?
Well, when I'm tall. I'm 5'7½". I think I'm still that tall. I understand people shrink as they get older, but I don't think it's my case. So I started playing basketball, and we had an excellent team with the
This is
in high school.
Yes, okay.
We did a lot of beach sports. We all went to the beach a lot. We just did things that you did back then, which was outside. We had picnics outside. We would all jump in a car, maybe 6 or 8 of us in a car, and crammed in there and go down to Sebastian Inlet and go to the beach or go fishing down there. And at that time, there was no bridge across there, so you just stopped. There was also a dirt road from the sea dunes all the way from on A1A. So we often hoped that we wouldn't get stuck in the sand and have to explain why we were so late getting home.
Who were some of the friends that you hung around with at that time?
one of the prominent families in the area were the Platts. Snooky Platt was one of my best friends in school. Another one was Marilyn Yeager, which was also one of the families that had been in this area for a long time. There's the Schmidts from down around Palm Bay and Grant and Malabar. The Jorgensens. Joy Jorgensen and I played basketball together. Veronica Schmidt and I played basketball together. So we were a close-knit group. It was a small school. Our graduating class in 1954 was 75 students, and we knew each other. All of us knew everybody in the class. Most of the children were transients, like I was. They came here in their freshman or junior or senior years and just assimilated into the group without any problem because it was small, and they were so happy to have new people in the area.
As far as your family goes, where at this time we were gone back to in high school, your mother and father, what were they doing? Your father's retired. He's moved back to Indialantic. Is he working? Is he
Well,
a working mother? Or
my mother was a homemaker. My father was he had retired from the business that we had as well as from the military, and he just got interested in the politics in the area. His family up in New York were all interested in politics, so he got interested in making the town a town and an incorporated area. And he and John McLean became very good friends. John McLean was the first mayor of Indialantic, and he was on the council with him. Then my father became mayor on the next term, the second mayor. And when John McLean decided not to run anymore, my father started his own business later on. He had sort of a PR business he did with Jack Frazier. The two of them were together. Jack Frazier lived in Indialantic, and then he lived down in Melbourne Beach. Then my father opened up his own printing business, which I don't think I wrote that in my thing there, but he opened up a printing business which he had up and on the O'Galley Boulevard up at Indian Harbor Beach. And he and my mother ran that. And then my father decided, okay, he was tired of that, so he retired again. And then they began to travel, traveled all around the country.
What kind of training was that?
For what?
The business he opened up.
My father was the type of person that he decided he wanted to do something, he did it. He just did it. He didn't know that he couldn't do it, so he just went into it and did a little research. He started out slowly. He had his own, bought his machines and started it up. He had done some writing. He was a writer for the Melbourne Times, so he knew a little bit about the publications business too. He didn't go into it on a grand scale. He just did something to keep himself busy, and something that he enjoyed. When he didn't enjoy doing it, he would usually go on to something else.
How long was your father in politics in Indiana?
I would say somewhere into the 60s, into the 70s.
So he was
Just
in politics for...
on a limited basis. He was interested in things, but he stayed mainly on the peripheral areas of it. As I said, he would do something until he got tired of doing it, and then he would find something else to do. And also at the time, the printing business was taking up a lot of his time. He enjoyed what he did because it involved him with a lot of other people, but then when it became work, he no longer wanted to do it. His original training was as an electrical engineer. He had gone to school in New York and graduated from New York University. New York City University, and then when the war broke out, he went into the military. and what he did in the military was the Signal Corps, because he had worked for the telephone company up in Long Island, and he was retired. Then he also from the when he retired from the military, he also retired from the telephone company, because they counted the time that he had in the military as part of the time that he had working for the telephone company. So it was nice that he got 2 retirements out of it.
Yeah, yeah. All right, let's focus on you right now. So we're skipping ahead. You've married.
Mm-hmm.
Children.
Yes, my husband and I have 2 sons, John, and he was born in 1957, and Lawrence was born in 1961. They both live up north now and have children of their own.
How many grandchildren do you have?
We have 5 grandchildren. John has 3 boys, and Lawrence has 2 boys, no girls. So I have to be satisfied with daughter-in-laws.
Right. So when you were raising your children, did you work outside of your home? Or?
Yes, I did. I was, when I was living down here in Florida, I did not. I stayed at home. And when I went up to Virginia, we moved to Virginia. My husband was working with IBM. And,
Now, when did you move?
we moved to Virginia in 1970. And I decided that I wanted to do something else. And I started a small catering business about 1975, 76, somewhere in that time. And I made cakes for people that wanted cakes, for wedding cakes, birthday cakes, bar mitzvahs, glad you're here, bridal showers, anything. And then I also did a small catering that I would do brunches. And that was a lot of fun.
Now, what brought you guys back to?
Well, we always planned to come back. We made trips back and forth as much as possible we could. We always loved the area, and we always wanted to move back. The house next door to my mother and father on Michigan Avenue came up for sale. And my husband said, let's buy it. And I said, okay. So we bought the house and rented it until my husband retired in 1992. And we did the little remodeling of the house, and then we did the moved in, and we've been there for the last 16 years, almost.
Oh, okay. Your neighbors, can you talk a little bit about your neighbors at that time once you came back from Virginia?
When I came back from Virginia, the neighborhood pretty much has changed. A little younger group. Most of them both work, and their children are grown, so there's not a lot of things in common with us now. But they're still lovely neighbors. We get together, the neighbors get together once or twice a year, sort of not a block party, but a house party or a garage party, whatever. And we get to touch base with each other. But I know that they're always there if you need them. The neighborhood when I was a kid was, as a teenager, was a lot different, because the parents, one parent worked, the other parent stayed home. It was not unusual. It was more unusual for a wife to work than it was for her to be at home, which is the reverse now. My mother was very active in the neighborhood, with running back and forth with a cup to get coffee. And they would go grocery shopping together, because the families had usually only one car. And because my mother usually had a car at home, she was the one that drove. So there would be 4 or 5 women that would go grocery shopping together every week. And then they would come home and they'd have all their little bags would be marked for a niece, and Edith, which was my mother, and Alice, who lived across, the 2 Alices that lived across the street.
When she went shopping, she kind of went shopping for everybody.
Well, they all went together.
Oh, they went off, yeah.
They all went together, and they loaded up the car, and then when they got home, they divvied up the bags and went their own way. Because I was a teenager and the only jobs that were available was babysitting, I babysat for most of the young couples on my street and in my neighborhood. The Brooms lived next door to us, Roger and Chauncey Broom. So I babysat for both, for Kent and for Judy. And I babysat for the Abbotts who lived across the street, a little way up the street from us, and the Bergers who lived there. The neighborhood was just a nice neighborhood, and we all really enjoyed it. Everybody was outside. Very few houses had air conditioning, so the windows were open, and you could see you heard if somebody was walking down the street, and you ran out to say hi, or you were working in the yard. It was just a really lovely neighborhood.
Being a teenage girl,
Mm-hmm.
where did you shop for clothes and things like that, or wasn't that important to a girl who enjoyed the,
Oh, yes.
the sand?
Well, look for a bathing suit. That was a big priority. There were a number of stores in Melbourne. Coleman's department store, Turner's department store, Dennis Medvine's. They were all very nice places to go and find clothes. They had a nice selection, but if you were looking for something a little bit more, say a wedding dress or something like that, you went to Orlando and the shops over in Orlando. But it wasn't something that you did on a regular basis. It was a big trip, and usually the neighbors all said, "Oh, we're going too."
As a married couple and you've got children, what did you and your family do for entertainment in this area?
The movies. There was one movie theater in the area called the Van Croy, and there was a number of places that you just went to for dinner. There was the Pickwick restaurant there, Marie's restaurant down by the river. I'm trying to think. Pop's Casbah was downtown. There was memories.
Yeah, at this time was
The Bahama
trade-
Beach Club,
yeah,
yes.
The trade winds
Mhm.
still active.
The
when
trade
you
winds
were
was, oh yes, the
young
trade
mom?
winds was going strong at that time. The Bahama Beach Club was going. We had, we went to dinner there. We went to activities. If there was a party that you wanted to have, you usually had it either at the trade winds or at the Bahama Beach Club.
What about what is it? There was this restaurant bar across the street from the Bahama Valley High. Did you ever go to the Valley High?
No, but the Valley High was a bar.
Oh, okay. I don't remember.
No, the Valley High was a bar. Adults went to the Valley High.
I'm talking about when you were a young family. You were here. You had your family, your children, and as young adults, were the trade winds in the Bahama Beach Club
Yes.
something that you guys did as
Yes, I belonged to a Homemakers Club and a garden club when we moved over down to Melbourne Beach in 1960. My husband and I, we lived on Hibiscus Trail. And the garden club and the Homemakers Club that I belonged was a very active group. We had dances for fundraisers that when we were in the garden club, and our dances were very well attended because everybody was so happy there was something going on. But we did a lot of things for the town, for Melbourne Beach, because it was a garden club for Melbourne Beach. We did plantings and beautifying different parts of the town and trying to set up areas that would be beautiful for people to see and enjoy in Florida.
Being here in the late 50s, that coincides with the beginning of the space industry and Sputnik going up and all that. How did that affect Indialantic?
It was an explosion. People were coming in. It was new people, very, very educated people were coming in. The schools, in turn, had to keep up with them because the people who came in, normally they were all graduates of a college with higher degrees, and they wanted their children to go to a school that had the advantages that they had had.
I remember in like the mid-60s, that's when all these junior high schools popped
Yes.
up, Hoover, Johnson, all of those.
Mm-hmm.
And your children, they went to...
My two sons went to Indialantic Elementary, and my older son went to Hoover, and then we moved away before my younger son was ready for junior high. but they enjoyed that.
So Lois, tell us about your life today. What are you doing to keep yourself busy and active?
Well, I'm retired and I do anything I want to. I do like to travel. Means I have to nag my husband to go, but he eventually caves in and says, okay, okay. I do physical activity. I line dance. Enjoy that. I do that a couple of days a week. And I'm with a group that I really enjoy, take two different classes. I do a little bit of baking now and then. I don't do any of the catering that I did before, but I do some of the cakes and that as gifts now. If I have a friend, and I have a lot of friends that are older that are now remarrying because they've been widowed or divorced or whatever, and as a gift for their wedding, I give them their wedding cake. And well, I get to eat it, and besides, I also get to go to the wedding and the reception.
Now, what are your thoughts about Indialantic today? I mean, you've been here, you know, for quite a while, kind of back and forth between here and Virginia. I mean, what do you think about today in Indialantic?
Indialantic is still a nice residential area. I'd like to see it stay more residential, but I'm realistic and I know it's not going to. I enjoy the town. I like the quietness of the town. I like the closeness of the town. And if you're really interested in knowing more of the people in the town, it's not a problem to put yourself out there and meet them. At this point in my life, I enjoy meeting people, but I'm not really looking for my best friend because I already have many best friends. I still have the best friends that I had in high school. We get together about 7, 8, 9, 10 of us once a month and go to lunch. We go to different places where we enjoy each other's company and we hash the old days, plus we bring up the new things and we solve the problems of the world.
What about your Mill High reunions?
We've been doing the reunions since the 5th year, and we've tried to do them every 5 years. I've attended most of them. We recently had our 50th anniversary and got together, and usually we include, because our class was small and it's getting smaller as the older we get, we do the incorporation of other classes. And because it's usually such a successful thing, even classes back into the 40s decide they want to come because they get to see people that they knew in school too. And then also a lot of the students married students from other classes. So there's different reunions that they put together, and ours happens to be one that the last one we had was over 350 people showed up. And we had it at the O'Galley Civic Center. And we used the two big rooms there. And we had a wonderful time. We had people come from all over the country.
Now, when was this?
This was 4 years ago.
Oh, 4 years ago. Okay.
And we had such a good time. We had, as I said, it was good to get together with them, and I took a tape, videotape, and went around, and I had everyone say their name and where they lived now, and if they wanted to say anything real fast. I only gave them about 30 seconds, but we managed to get everybody, and it's fun to be able to look back and also to see some of them and say, you still look pretty good, and I recognize you, and someone else is like, gee, I would have never known you.
Lois, is there anything else you'd like to share with us about Indialantic, your thoughts about the town, anything else that we haven't touched on?
Well, other than the fact that I do really like Indialantic to live here. I don't want to advertise it for a lot of new people to come in because I like to keep it small. But I do understand that that's not a good reality. I do enjoy the town. I do know that its best interests are there for anybody that's in the council that's going to, and the mayors and that over the years, that they are looking out for the interest of the town and the people that live in the town, because it is a residential town. and it's not a very large town. So it's one of the things that I'd like to see stay small, because we need small communities. We need that feeling of being part of something, not just among the group.
Thank you very, very much.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
I just wanted to.
Oh,
interject.
I'm sorry. Yes, please.
I was wondering maybe if you could talk a little bit more about your father's involvement with the town, and the push for incorporation, and why he liked being involved in the town and being involved in politics in the town. You could talk, and when you're answering, you look at Denise.
Okay. Well, as I said, it was a small town then. It was a group of men that got together that decided that the town needed to be incorporated to be able to get assistance for different things in the town, to get the streets paved, to get the lighting that they needed in the town, to get any help that the town as a town needed that they couldn't afford by just taxing their members of the town. And they decided that the best way to do it would be to incorporate. And John McLean was a big spearheaded for the town, and Dr. McLean, and my father was interested in it, and he became interested in the politics, and he did. It became a natural progression for him to go on and to run for office as the mayor when John McLean decided not to go on any further with it. They did so much to get the town united, and there was a group of men, and it wasn't a very large group of men. And I'm trying desperately at this moment to remember names. Walter Rowlands, I believe, was one. At the moment I said, my mind is blank for the names. I need someone here to help me to jog the memory.
It's not very important to remember all the names. That's
No.
okay. It's just your recollections of that time that are important.
I remember Mrs. Miller was when Daddy was mayor, Mrs. Miller was the town clerk. And she was a very formidable woman, very competent, very pleasant woman, but very stern. She was not someone that you would think would have a great sense of humor, but she did. She had a family that lived here, and she was raising one or two sons, I don't remember now, but she was raising her children here. And she did work for the town as the town clerk. And the summer that I was pregnant with my son John, I had been working for RCA out at Patrick Air Force Base, and you were only allowed to work until you were about 6 months pregnant or so. And I managed to stretch it out to 7, but at the time the town was doing re-registration for voting, and my father said, "Would you like a part-time job?" And I said, "Sure." So Mrs. Miller said, "Come in," and all I had to do was to register the people as they came in to vote. And a funny side thing was some of the women that would come in who were obviously over 21, and I would ask them their age and where they lived, and they would say their name, and they would say legal. And I said, "I beg your pardon?" And they said, "Legal." And I said, "Excuse me, please." And I jumped up, went as fast as I could, waddling, and asked Mrs. Miller, I said, "She won't give me her age." And she said, "Oh, that's quite all right." She said, "What did she say?" And I said, "She said legal." And she said, "Well, write down legal. She's of legal age." And I said, "Okay." So I went in and I wrote down legal. I later found out she was 81. She was definitely legal
Definitely.
to vote.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good story. Thank you.
You're
Oh,
welcome.
thank